Okay, Bio 30, we're going to start the next unit. Topic 1 is the endocrine system, and then topic 2 is going to be the nervous system, and then we're going to keep going after that into different nervous-related systems and body systems like the brain, the eye, the ear. But topic 1 is just the hormones, so we'll have a video or two here on the major hormones. We're eliminating the discussion of quite a few, unfortunately, just due to trying to trim the fat in online teaching here. And so I'll go through some, but not all. If you want full overview of all the videos or all the topics of all the hormones, just check out the slides on Google Classroom. Okay, so comparing the endocrine and the nervous system, the big things here are that even though topic 1 we're going to talk about the endocrine system, the nervous system produces neurotransmitters versus the endocrine system produces hormones. We've got direct cell-to-cell communication in the nervous system versus the endocrine system is hormones traveling throughout the blood to reach their target gland or organ or whatever part of the body it might be going to. The nervous system is very fast acting versus the endocrine system can have hormones that are fast acting, but oftentimes can have very slow long term effects. The nervous system is usually short in duration versus hormones typically last longer periods of time. The nervous system, think about it, if you're reaching out for something, that's a nervous system response, activating muscle contraction and muscle relaxation very quick, versus the endocrine system is longer lasting. If you are happy, you're going to be happy for longer than just 2 seconds, right? And the happiness might be caused by a hormone. And so the nervous system causes muscle contractions and glandular secretions versus the endocrine system is more so for growth and development and metabolism. So that's just an overview of the two of those. The nervous system is tied into the endocrine system through the brain. So the hypothalamus, a portion of the brain, controls this gland called the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is like the master gland because it's quite an integral sort of central location for most of the endocrine system. So the hypothalamus is going to control the pituitary gland. And that's how these two systems, the endocrine and the nervous system, are linked. Now, the endocrine system for hormones, usually a gland is going to release hormones which get traveled or released and travel through the blood, and then they will target a tissue, another gland or a hormone of some sort. There's certain receptors that are only going to bind to certain hormones. So they're very specific, much like an antigen-antibody relationship in our immunity discussion in Bio 20. Very similar here, right? It's like a very specific receptor for a very specific hormone. Hormones are carried by the blood throughout the entire body, yet they only affect certain cells. And again, like I said, that's because we have very specific receptor sites, kind of like a lock and key mechanism. If the hormone doesn't match the receptor, you won't have an action. Okay, so the whole point of the endocrine system and the nervous system are to maintain homeostasis. We are trying to maintain balance in the body, or what's called dynamic equilibrium, right? We never want to go too high or too low above baseline. Depression or major psychological disorders or major biological disorders like diabetes or growth hormone issues all can be caused through an inadequate homeostatic environment where you cannot maintain that balance, that ebb and flow within a certain baseline. Okay. Very quickly, I just want to define trophic versus non-trophic hormones. A trophic hormone is a hormone that gets released and it affects other glands and causes the secretion of other hormones. So follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, and thyroid-stimulating hormone are all examples of trophic hormones. Versus non-trophic hormones, they do not affect other glands, but instead they directly affect other tissues or other cells. So I like to talk about when I explain this in class, I usually say it's like a vacation. So if you take a local vacation, it's like a non-tropical vacation, right? You are going to travel to Calgary for your holidays. If you travel to Calgary, you're not going anywhere tropical. It's a non-tropical vacation. You're staying pretty much right there. So you're leaving your city and you're going somewhere very specific. You're going to Calgary, nothing special. But if you were going on a tropical vacation, like a trophic hormone, you are going to leave your gland that released you, like Edmonton, and you're going to land in maybe a middle stop somewhere to lay over. And then from that layover airport, you'll travel to this faraway resort in Mexico where you then get to enjoy your tropical vacation. So tropic hormones, just like tropical vacations, have you going to another location, another gland, and then that gland is going to release other hormones, unlike a non-trophic hormone, which just goes directly to your destination and acts right there with no other stops. So thyroxine is an example of a non-trophic hormone, and thyroid stimulating hormone is an example of a trophic hormone. Endocrine versus exocrine glands. An endocrine gland releases substances directly into the blood versus exocrine glands, which release substances into a duct, and the duct then releases it. For example, salivary glands or sweat glands. If you need sweat on your arms or your back or your hands, you are going to have glands in your skin which are releasing the sweat. So that's an exocrine gland. Versus endocrine glands are typically our hormonal glands, so the glands that are releasing hormones into our bloodstream. Pancreas is an endocrine and an exocrine gland. It's an exocrine gland because in Bio-20, you might remember that it secretes digestive enzymes into the pancreatic ducts of the small intestine. It's an endocrine gland because it releases hormones, insulin and glucagon, which we also learned about in Bio-20, which relate to sugar balance in the body. Throughout our hormone discussion, we'll talk about negative feedback or feedback inhibition, and this is basically the way for the body to balance hormones. Once you have released something and it's done the job it's supposed to, it sends a negative feedback loop to turn off the thing that was producing it. Because you never want to make too much of something because then you'll never be able to regulate what the function of that hormone was. So if you have a hormone released because you have too much sugar in the blood, then as soon as that hormone is released and it lowers the amount of sugar in the blood, you then stop making that hormone so that you don't keep reducing the blood sugars to a point where it's unhealthy. So once a hormone produces the desired effect, the hormone production must stop or decrease at the very least. And this is important for maintaining that homeostatic balance. All right, so negative feedback or feedback inhibition, an example here would be like thyroid stimulating hormone releasing factor. This releasing factor, it's like a protein, is going to release thyroid stimulating hormone. The thyroid stimulating hormone is going to release something called thyroxine. And then when thyroxine is released, it's going to turn off the release of thyroid stimulating hormone releasing factor. And so by shutting off the release of this, thyroxine basically stops the body from making itself, which is important in self-regulation. You want to stop. Too much of a good thing is always bad. You want to stop making things when you no longer need them. And when you do need them, you'll just turn off this negative feedback loop, because when there's not enough thyroxine present, there won't be a strong inhibitory signal. So TSH-RF will be able to produce TSH, and TSH will make thyroxine, and then thyroxine will, once it's in high enough quantities, then send a strong signal to turn off TSH-RF in the meantime. Okay, so another example of a feedback loop in general, you'll have a hypothalamus release some sort of releasing factor, not always, but usually if it's labeled RF, the releasing factor. That'll then target usually, but not always, the anterior pituitary, which could release a trophic hormone. The trophic hormone will then get to a target gland, and remember, trophic hormones are like tropical vacations. The hormone is released from one location, ends up at a different airport, and then that other airport sends you to a different location, or in this case, the target gland releases its own its own hormone. And then that hormone has an action, and when that action has done its job, it sends negative feedback signals to turn off its own production, so we don't have too much of that produced. Okay, so we're not going to hit all of these, but some of what we'll talk about are hormones released from the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid gland, the liver, the pancreas, the adrenal gland, the kidneys, the ovaries, and the testes. So we won't hit all the hormones in our online learning, but we will hit some of the hormones that are released from these various glands. And we'll do that in the next video.